Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson! You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Hello, Al, are we live?
I think we are live. How you
All
doing,
right.
kids?
Hey, it's great to have you. Thanks so much. Today is April 10th, 2022, and we're recording our second episode of the Mormon News Roundup.
Yep, ready to go.
Did you have a good week?
So far, so good. How about
Awesome.
yourself?
Very, very well. I went to church this morning. I had a great time. A friend of mine who is a big-time stake president, and I'm out here visiting in Utah. He's a big-time stake president. Took me to church. He's an old friend of mine. And I met some of my old peeps that I used to hang out with. They didn't have a person to play the hymns, played the hymns, had a great time at church. Very spiritual experience, good talk. Only stayed for an hour. And that's the way church should be, by the way. 1 hour is absolutely plenty. 45 minutes, even better. So, yeah, I had a great time. I just want to remind our listeners of the purpose of this podcast. This is Mormon News Roundup. We're going to call the internet every week to ruminate about this great and spacious beehive that is the world of Mormonism. We're going to find the best news articles. We're going to dissect them using our incredible insights into the LDS Church and other Mormon-related entities, and then bring that to you in an entertaining manner.
That's right. And these topics that we are tackling, especially this week, they're not the easy topics. So, we're not looking for what's going to sit there and promote the church, but also they're things that are really important about the church. So, this isn't what you're going to hear in Relief Society, but it's also, we're not here to pick on the church. We're just here to talk about the things that are really significant and what's really important going on.
Absolutely. And you're not going to get these on the churchroom.churchofjesuschrist.org either. These are the tough to find news articles that are somewhat, we like to delve into the controversies. We like to stir things up and see what's going on out there. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we kick off our first article. We are looking for a sponsorship of this podcast. And one of the reasons for is we want to reach a wide audience. I actually reached out to the Mormon Stories podcasting family to see if we could join their umbrella. Haven't heard anything back yet. And I also reached out to Mormon Discussions podcasting family with Bill Reel and John DeLim, all of those guys, and see if we can join their family, get a wider audience. We're trying to build our brand up here. Haven't heard anything back yet. I also reached out to Signature Books, who does a lot of great books as far as Mormon history, doctrine, and culture is concerned. And I managed to talk to a couple of people there. So we've got a couple of things in the works as far as getting our message out to a wider audience. And I would like to remind everyone also, the Mormon News Roundup has an email right now. It's called MormonNewsRoundup@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon. Right now we're sitting at 0 emails and 0 Patreon, but that's okay. This is only our second podcast. So we also are in the midst of building a website. We are going to try to secure MormonNewsRoundup.org so that we can post these, have interactions with you. And I also wanted to give credit to our theme song that you listened to at the beginning of this podcast. You've heard of Weird. Now, my co-host here is Al, and I'm D-Vase. Yeah. And this theme song is also by Al, Weird Alma. Now, you've heard of Weird
Alma. He's a different guy than me, but same name.
Yeah, Weird Al Yankovic does parody songs, and Weird Alma does Mormon parody songs. Yes, so if you haven't checked out his, if you just Google him, I think his website is on bandcamp.com, I believe, is where he lists all of his stuff. Some really, really funny songs out there. So with that intro, is there anything else that I missed in this intro, Al?
No, boy, when you talked about all three of those families would be good fits for us, I think. So we hope that they'll give us some good consideration, and hopefully we get an invite from one of them.
Yeah, it could take a while. We might have to be recording this for a couple of months. We're going to do a weekly podcast for a couple of months. Maybe after we have a few episodes under our belt, we'll have a little bit more credibility.
Yeah, exactly. So. No, I think that's all the housekeeping that I had to go over. And unless you got anything else, I think we're ready to jump.
Awesome. Well, Al brought 4 of the best news articles this week, and I've got 5. So why don't you kick it off and let us know what news tickled your fancy in the world of Mormondom this week?
Hey everybody, it's D-Vase here. Thanks so much for listening to the Mormon News Roundup. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Allow me to explain. Anchor has the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Okay, Dives. So my first news article this week comes from truthandtransparency.org. The title of the article is LDS Church has most valuable private real estate portfolio in the U.S., the evidence suggests. So this is based on a study from 2020, or all the information in this study comes from 2020. This is an article by Ryan McKnight and Ethan Gregory Dodge. So let's see. Just to hit the main points of this article. We've got, they mentioned that the LDS Church, as far as private land holdings, they're in the top 5 landholders acreage-wise, but they're actually ranked number 1 in the market value.
Hey, we're number 1. Let's go.
Yeah, that's right. So market value, they own $15.7 billion worth of real estate. Now, this is just
minimum market value, minimum holdings of $15.7 billion.
That's right. So this is the very bare minimum amount. Okay, so this is counting agricultural, commercial, or religious. So as far as acreage wise, it's 1.75 million acres of United States land is in the hands of the LDS Church. That's spread between 15,963 parcels. About 50% of that's agricultural, and the other 50% would be commercial or religious. So this isn't including the single-family residences. On this article, there's a really awesome interactive map that Ethan Gregory Dodge has created. So anybody that wants to go to truthandtransparency.org and look at this, you can also get there from the link in our show notes.
It was released on April 5th, 2022, by the way.
That's right. This was released on April 5th. But like I said, the study, or all the information in this study, comes from 2020. Mm-hmm. So the information's a couple of years old, but it takes that long to compile it. So that's no surprise there. But this is a very current article from April 5th of this year.
Yes. Now, the Truth and Transparency org, they were originally called Mormon Leaks. Yes. Familiar with the concept of WikiLeaks? That's where people leak secret or sensitive documents. Mormon Leaks never really caught on. I reviewed I thought it was a really cool idea. I reviewed all the documents in there. That's where we got the pay stubs, by the way, of the general authorities, including Elder B. Eyring's pay stubs and other people's base. We know what the base salary is of the general authorities. They became the Truth and Transparency organization, and this is their final article, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Al, how do you think the church obtained, how did they become the number 1 real estate holding asset in the United States? How did they get from Joseph Smith owning absolutely nothing? He had to live with his father-in-law when he first married Emma. I mean, he had nothing.
That's right. He very much had a childhood of poverty.
Yeah.
So if we go all the way back to Joseph Smith Sr., Joseph Smith Sr., he inherited a few $1,000s when, his parents passed away. That few $1,000s he sunk into a ginkgo biloba, I believe, or maybe it was either ginkgo or ginseng. I think it was
ginseng. It was a ginseng.
Yeah, he invested in ginseng. I knew it was one of those Asian plants, but the guy that he invested that money into, or that inheritance, ran off, and he spent several months trying to track the guy down, but he never saw a penny of his money back ever again. And, he couldn't keep up the hunt for this guy forever. So eventually he just had to chalk it up to loss and walk away. As a result, the Smith family was raised in very much poverty circumstances. They had to move around quite a bit, had to, take on whatever work they could find in order to make ends meet. Had to rent a lot of houses. Didn't really own anything until Joseph Smith came up with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and from there is when the Smith family started getting taken care of. Really,
that is very well put. How did they then go to being it's one thing to start a religion, a small religion, end up doing very well for yourself. It's a whole nother thing to surpass every other private. We're talking in business and other endeavors. How did the church become number one?
They so from there they went from and this is Joseph Smith times. They did some land speculation. They started up a bank in Kirtland, or kind of an anti-banking society, as it was called. That took the investments from the membership and the local investors and turned it over into land speculations. It ended up failing. And this was a big problem when the church left Kirtland finally. But, anybody can look into that on their own time. I'll try to be as brief as I can with this. So it grew into land holdings. I mean, when Brigham Young came west, he laid claim to the entire state of Utah, big chunks of Idaho as well. They, were able to take that and negotiate into better situations along the way. A lot of donations to the church in the form of tithes and offerings put the church in a better position financially wise to go and buy up other properties. And then over the course of time, you see that the church grew and grew. Most recently, probably since the year 2000, the church made great strides in the real estate market. They really invested heavily in the stock market and real estate, and they came out doing really well. It's because of these. It's because of these things that you see, like Times, the Times magazine. Time magazine, they did the article of LDS.Inc. and the church was kind of upset about that at the time.
Well, at the time that article came out, do you know how much time thought that the church was worth?
I should have done more research into this, but I'm guessing
40 billion. 40 billion. The church owns at least $20 billion in just real estate alone.
Yeah.
Much less everything else that they own. And don't forget, Al, that when people die, a lot of times when Mormons die, they don't give their home, they don't give their savings to their offspring, to their children.
That's right. A lot of times they donate it to the church.
They donate it straight to the church. And that's how you become a real estate juggernaut. And also shrewd, smart, cutthroat investing. Also in the business sector, the church has many for-profit business ventures, and they have pretty sharp elbows, and they're not afraid to use them.
That's right. And when people start talking about negotiating a deal with the church and even donating land for church houses or temples, a lot of times they'll approach church members, and the members will think that they're dealing with the kind, sweethearted leadership of that's the front face of the church. But no, what they're actually dealing with is these very sharp-elbowed real estate holdings companies. And so they'll get negotiated for the cheapest price possible.
Absolutely.
And so, a lot of these deals, they're entered in very open, let's see, not open-minded, but open-armed with the membership of the church. And it's really not what the people might think that they're getting themselves into.
Absolutely. Well, I think and of course, they don't release any of this to anyone, right? This was found out from a Truth and Transparency organization. This was unlike, President Hinckley, one of the past presidents, when he was interviewed, I believe it was by Larry King. Larry King said, "Well, why don't you release your finances to the world?" And you remember his response. He said, "Well, I think that information belongs to the members of the church."
Yeah.
Is this information available for the members of the church?
Not that I've ever seen. I know that the membership like to think that it's very open and transparent. Every April conference, they go through and they do the whole accounting and whatnot, and they'll do a reporting of what the audit is. But this is the kind of information that's not disclosed in that audit.
Absolutely. Now, technically, Gordon B. Hinckley was correct because it is available to the members of the church. And when I mean available to the members, it's available to about 5 or 10 people at the top. Those are members of the church. He didn't say all the members.
Yeah, that's right.
He didn't lie. He was available to the members, just not you and me, Al, right?
That's right.
Okay. Anything else on this one?
No, I think
Okay.
we pretty well covered that.
All right, I got another link that we got in the show notes here, and this is from the General Conference. Now, I found somebody put together a really cool graphic on Reddit. This was released on, so help me out here on this first, sorry, I'm pulling this up here.
Yep, let's go ahead.
Was released 7 days ago today. So that would be released on the 3rd of April. And it's a data dashboard updated with a graphic of the announcement on the last General Conference, 192nd General LDS Conference. We got 17 new temples announced. So that's 100 temples in total announced by President Nelson alone. And that almost equals every one of his predecessors combined.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a truly tremendous effort here. And I'm out here visiting in Utah, and I can see that the Taylorsville Temple, which I'm not that far from, is currently under construction. And it's just unprecedented because we're going to go over some of the growth numbers here in a little bit. But one would think that with that many temples, you would be seeing a commensurate growth level, because it seemed like in times past that the temples were supposedly announced in places where the church had converts, or new places where they had been led in by the government to have missionaries, and now those members needed access to the temple. That doesn't seem to be the case. These temples don't seem to necessarily be correlated to church growth. So let me ask you, Al, what then is the purpose of these temples? And some of them are very close to other temples. So the Taylorsville Temple here is within 10 miles of about 6 other temples. So what do you think the purpose is of these 17 new temples?
We've got a very interesting situation coming on. And I'll tell you what my personal thoughts are on this. And, you know, this is why people are tuning in to hear this, is this is just our own personal commentary. So my personal thought is, as a TBM in late 1990s Utah County, it was a really cool place where you could stand up on the mountain and you could see from, in fact, if you went to a point of the mountain and hiked all the way to the top, you could look south, see the Provo Temple. You could look not nearly as far south and see the Mount Timpanogos Temple. And then you could turn around and you could see the Jordan River Temple. And then further up, you could see the Salt Lake Temple.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that the church, especially here in Utah, really likes being able to stand in one place and see multiple temples. So that's my personal thought behind it. Also, it gives the illusion of growth without actually having growth. I mean, the church has obviously reported its lowest growth rate ever this last year.
Yes, it did.
So
is it did they want to make these temples, you know, it's kind of like think of like casinos. You can't be anywhere in the United States without being, I think, 2 hours away from a casino. I read that somewhere. I don't know if that's true. I think it is true.
It could be, yeah.
Because they want to make sure that everyone at any time can be within 2 hours. Do you think that is what the church is trying to do, to make it so that people can be within an hour, within 2 hours of a temple? Do you think that's the reason behind it, or?
It sure seems that way. And the reason why is because let's take the northern Utah, southern Idaho border, okay?
Yeah.
So we had the Logan Temple up there for a long time.
Yeah.
And then they built the Brigham City Temple just through Sardine Canyon over on the Brigham City side.
Which is like an hour away, right?
Not even. It's like half an hour, really. Okay. And it's pretty close. Well, then you go further north and you have the Pocatello Temple that they announced a few years back. And that should be finished pretty soon here, I think. I believe that they just started the open house. So then they announced a temple in Smithfield, Utah.
Yeah.
And that seems a little strange because Smithfield is about 10 minutes away from the Logan Temple.
Now, I mean, is this Logan Temple being used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? So that's what I've heard from my stake. I was actually talking to this with my stake president friend. He's saying that some of these temples are overtaxed and that you have to wait days to be able to get into them. Have you heard? Have you heard
May,
that?
maybe if you're looking for a foreign language session, but I doubt it.
I really find that hard to believe. I think there may be some one-offs, some occasional temples out there that could be full. But when I used to do temple work, you could show up at virtually any temple, anywhere, anytime, and get in with virtually no issues ever.
Yeah, without even a wait, really.
Right. So
Yeah.
I don't buy that. And don't forget that the Shanghai temple, the church is going to be built. We don't even have the green light whatsoever.
Yeah.
The Chinese government is giving that a big 2 thumbs down. We have a temple that's supposedly going up in Russia. We don't even know where it's going to be. And the most egregious example for me is the Austria temple. So according to the church records, there's 4,500 members in Austria, but activity rates in Europe are, let's be generous and call it 20%. That's going to be a very generous number, 20% activity, but only about 3/4 of those have temple recommends. So we're talking about 15% of 4,500 people. This is a temple population of approximately 600 people. We're building, and I don't know what the number is, but let's call it $10 million for a temple.
Yeah,
I think that's a reasonable estimate.
Yeah, that seems pretty conservative, I would think.
I'm being very conservative in all this. We're building a $10 million temple for how many people did I say? For
600?
600 people. And again, there's temples within driving distance of Austria. So there's got to be something else behind this that is driving the church to be able to. Is this just a legacy issue for President Nelson because he wants to be the one who's associated with all of these?
To pull my tongue out of my cheek, I'd have to say yes.
Okay. Well, we're all speculating, but hey, the podcast's name is The Ruminations on the Great and Spacious Beehive, so that's what you.
That's right.
Okay, that's good on that. Why don't you head over to your next article?
All right, this next article, not too far away from Austria. We're going to independent.co.uk. So this is a British publication, and this one is kind of an op-ed. I've got a couple of op-eds in this one, and the reason I've done the op-eds is because I feel it's important to get people's opinions that they have put out there and published for the whole world regarding their opinions on the topics pertaining to Mormonism.
And this was released on April 1st, right?
Yes, this one's released on April 1st by Rachel. I'm going to slaughter her last name. It's Rueckert, I believe. Okay. Rueckert. Wow. The title of it is "I'm a Feminist Mormon. Almost everything you've heard about my culture is wrong." So the approach that she takes in this article that she's written is that you have the LDS Church and the way that it is with its own devised public persona that it portrays in General Conference, right? But then alongside that, you also have an LDS culture, and I would have to correct her and call it an LDS counterculture with what she's talking about, because what she's talking about in regards to her culture is very much the fringe culture that's not the mainstream. She talks about going to the Book of Mormon musicals. She laughed, thought it was kind of funny, but she also felt uncomfortable by the things. And the reason why she felt uncomfortable is because she didn't feel like her own personal flavor of Mormonism or her own interpretation of it was being reflected. That the distinct culture that goes alongside the religion is very different. And I think, well, you can say that, but, at what point do you stop actually being LDS? When you go and put your own culture out there that's like, oh, well, LDS people can be feminist, they can be anti-patriarch, they can be very nuanced or new age, they can be pro-LGBTQ, they can be LGBTQ themselves and still be LDS. And that to an extent is acceptable within Mormonism, but you can't actually be a practicing LGBTQ person and a practicing LDS person.
Oh, that's right. Now, I get a kick out of the title of this news article because remember President or Boyd K. Packer gave the famous speech on the 3 great dangers of the church. The 3 great dangers of the church are number one, feminism. Number two,
Yeah.
the so-called intellectuals. That's his word. So-called intellectuals. And number three was LGBT. Was what he called homosexuals.
Yeah.
So she's saying, I'm a feminist Mormon, but you're one of the greatest dangers to the church right there off of the bat.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, wait a minute, Al, let me ask you, do you consider yourself a feminist?
I do actually.
Okay, so that is strike one. Number two, do you consider yourself a so-called intellectual?
I don't know that I would label myself intellectual, but I think I could be labeled intellectual.
Okay, so
I'll accept it.
That's strike two. And strike three, homosexual?
No,
okay,
I'm very much cishet. You know,
okay, so 2 out of 3 ain't bad, but the idea. Let me expand on what you said. The idea that you can be a Jack Mormon or a progressive Mormon. Remember what Harold B. Lee, president of the church, back in, I want to say about 1972 or so, he said that do you know what he defined a liberal Mormon? Okay, because that's when that term started to come into vogue because of the women's movement of the 60s, and he was in that. So a liberal Mormon for him, which I would say a feminist would be a liberal Mormon. That's my take on it. He said that that's somebody without a testimony. He made a very simple definition. If you're a liberal Mormon, then you don't have a testimony.
And that goes very contrary to what she's saying, because she says explicitly in her opinion piece here that she knows people who are Mormon, who are liberal, who are libertarian, who are socialist, who are communist. And that's a nice thought, I'm sure. It's definitely an opinion that will try to portray the church in a more accommodating and accepting light than the church itself wants to portray itself in. I just don't think it's true.
It seems like a pipe dream. It seems like that would be nice if the church gave a space for someone like that. Yeah. But it's a very, very difficult space to navigate. And I tip my hat off to her for trying to go to a space that is not very welcoming.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that when it comes down to it, she's going to have a hard time getting the church to be as accepting. I think she might be trying to bridge a gap that I don't think the avenue that she's trying to go is going to be the way that gap gets bridged.
I think that you can have summarized it better myself. Okay, very nice. Let's go on to my next article, which was from the Daily Herald on April 3rd, 2022 by Mark Shenfield. And this was some news did come out of conference. It's hard to get some news. So we covered the temple news. That's true. But then we also have Elder Oaks, who is in the First Presidency. And of course, he is the prophet. What do they call it? Prophet pro tem, or anyway, he's the prophet in waiting. Yeah. He's next in line. We'll just put it that way. Yeah. And it says that Oaks clarifies the LDS doctrine on LGBTQ related issues. And this clarification was basically just a restatement of how it's been for the last few years. There's nothing new about this. What I find interesting about this article, and the reason I wanted to include it, is it seems like Elder Oaks, remember, he's a former lawyer, former Utah Supreme Court justice before he was called into the church, a full-time church assignment. He seems to relish this particular issue. He seems to make it his, I think that some other apostles, senior leaders of the church, they will almost never make any statements about LGBTQ. And I think if they don't make a statement, it speaks volumes. Yeah. If they don't make any statements, you can better bet your bottom dollar that they are LGBTQ friendly. And the number one apostle that I'm thinking of is Uchtdorf. I can never remember a statement from him whatsoever on LGBTQ at all, ever. Now, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I couldn't find anything. But Oak seems to take he seems to be the fall guy. He's positioned himself to be like the fall guy on this issue. Like, we know that this issue is very, very unpopular. And I am willing to go out there and fall on my sword to maintain the party line. Do you get that vibe?
I totally get. This is one of his pet peeves. I'll tell you that. He got called out for the the gay conversion therapy when he was the president of BYU.
Yes.
He actually denied it. He denied that it went on while he was there, but
Right.
they have gone back and proven that yes, it happened while he was there at BYU.
Absolutely. There's no getting around it, because people had dissertations that were published during his tenure on electroshock and gay conversion therapy at BYU.
That's right. So, I mean, regardless of whether he wants everybody to know that he was there, that happened under his watch, I feel like he might be saying, well, it didn't happen under my watch, but I sure wish it would have. You know, that's what it seems like he's saying to me.
That is tough. That is rough. I can't go that far, but I hear what I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that he doesn't want to go that far.
No, but what I'm saying is that for as much as he keeps making an issue out of it, as much as he keeps playing that same key, it seems like he really has an issue with LGBTQ people.
And since he's next in line, and we know Elder Nelson is not going to, he's the oldest prophet, I believe, in history. And he's 97. I don't think anybody else has made it that far.
I think that's right.
So, I mean, he's not going to be around forever. And Elder Oaks is definitely going to be next in line. So if you're looking for reformation on LGBTQ issues, I think you're going to have to be waiting for another 15, 20 years, which is kind of a sad situation to be in.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Okay, thanks a lot. What's your let's go to your third article.
I'm going to head over to the church's news outlet, the KSL.com.
Okay.
And this one isn't necessarily tied to the church as much as it's tied to the church's locale. And it's the title of it is Human Trafficking Isn't Just a Problem Elsewhere, It's Happening in Urban Rural Utah, the report says. And this is coming from, let's see, her name is Marjorie Cortez.
Published on April 7th, 2022, right?
That's right. So this is a fairly recent one. But it talks about human trafficking that a lot of people, especially people that live in Utah, I've talked to several of them, and they have this attitude that, well, this sort of thing happens elsewhere, but it doesn't happen in my backyard. There may be crime that happens in other places in the country, but it just doesn't happen here. I think that they have an attitude or the mindset that they have a lower crime rate around this area. And I don't think that's true. I think that what this article points out is that, no, it actually is not a lower crime rate around here. It happens very much around here as well. Said that in February 2021, 6 people were arrested for human trafficking in Utah County massage parlors. So Utah County is very much the highest per capita Mormon community in the world.
By percentage.
Yeah, there's far more per capita people that are LDS in Utah County than anywhere else that you'll find. So, 6 people in this place, just in a sting operation in February 2021 last year. 6 people were arrested in parlors that were engaging in human trafficking in these massage parlors. I need to take a step back and also mention that this is a report that was done by the Utah Women and Leadership Project at Utah State University. So,
well, does the church, let me ask you this, does the church have any shelters for battered women? Does it have any places for people? Does it have a hotline for people who are being trafficked in Utah? Does it have anything that could help mitigate something like this?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of.
That they have LDS Family Services. As far as I know, that outreach is more for help facilitating adoptions,
right,
than anything else.
The church could. I mean, you want to talk? They have Welfare Square. That is the purpose. Which purpose is to feed is supposed to feed the hungry. But they don't have anything along these social. Remember, the church used to have a threefold mission of the church, and they expanded it to the fourth, which was to take care of. I think it was. I can't forget the exact verbiage, but it's basically to take care of the hungry and the less fortunate. That's basically the fourth mission of the church.
Okay.
But it's examples like this where the church doesn't have to my knowledge, anything really set up to help out with any domestic violence, any rape, any. So, I mean, if a woman comes into a bishop and says, you know, my husband's been beating me, yes, he can call the police, but the church doesn't have a place for that woman to stay. I mean, she could stay at the bishop's house, but there's no places for people who are being trafficked to have a hotline to the church and say, I'm a Mormon, I'm being trafficked, please help me. There's nothing really official that's out there for that.
You know, Dives, this is a real tragic topic as well, because there really isn't any good system set up at all, not just by the church, but by anywhere. They've got like Operation Underground Railroad, they're a group that has decided to go in and help get people who are victims of human trafficking liberated. But even them, that all they can do is just dump people on the street, and a lot of times what happens is they just go right back to exactly where they've been, because it's familiar, it's known, it's comfortable. Especially with regards to human sex trafficking, the statistics in this article, it's not known for sure, because, you know, who knows exactly what's going on, but from what they've seen in the people that have been rescued from human trafficking, 98% of sex trafficking victims are female. 60% of labor trafficking victims are male. And a lot of times these victims, they come from foster homes, runaways, drug addicts, marginalized people that have been kicked out of the house, the homeless population. You know, they go wherever they can to find the vulnerable. And so a lot of times you'll get people that are looking for some acceptance from somewhere, and they get preyed upon by human traffickers. But they're really, even like I said, after the FBI goes in, or Operation Underground Railroad goes in and gets these people out of the human trafficking situation, they don't have any place to catch them. They don't have anywhere to help them get rehabilitated, to teach them, hey, you know, you don't have to exchange sex for food or for protection or for a home.
Yeah. Let me just add, let me conclude this article with the following.
Yeah.
First of all, I was a runaway as a child. I ended up living in a foster home for a period of time. I had a very turbulent and kind of a traumatic childhood experience. So being a runaway is very near and dear to my heart. I also spent 3 years of my life in domestic violence prevention when I lived in the Midwest, and I worked for the government. And the government set up shelters. The government had agreements with hotels so that when someone came in, we would have a place for them to be for a period of time. So if the government has the ability to do these things, and it's not very expensive, it seems like in a church's kingdom, which is Utah, they could easily do a lot more than what they're doing on this particular topic.
Sure, and what a great place for it to start.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go on to my next article, which is was published on April 2nd, 2022 by Trent Toon on the Deseret News, and it was Church Names New Relief Society in Primary General Presidencies. And I can't remember a time when all of the female leadership of the church was changed over at the same time. And I listened to a lot more of this general conference than I had in times past. And I heard the Relief Society president, Camille Johnson's talk, really enjoyed it. She seems like a really strong leader. It's hard to gauge things in just the talk, but what drives me nuts sometimes with these General Relief Society and primary presidencies is sometimes the way that they address the membership in general conference. It can seem sometimes to be almost infantilizing. What am I saying?
Infantilizing.
Yeah, and I cannot stand that. And she didn't do any of that. So I was very impressed by her showing. And I also found it very interesting that the primary general presidency, we have our first African American person in the general primary in any presidency of the church ever.
That's excellent news.
All the way back. So the second counselor, Tracy Y. Browning, is an African American. And is the first black woman to serve in one of the church's in any of the church's general presidencies. So for me, that is a real step forward. And I also found it very interesting that President Browning had a full and active civilian career before joining church full employment several years ago. She worked outside of the home. And if you go back and listen to some of those older talks by President Hinckley, President Benson, and Eldon Tanner,
Yeah.
they would be rolling in the graves if they saw that somebody who is a full-time person who has children, and I can only presume her husband had a job. It's none of my business, but I can only presume that she has now ascended to such a high level. I think it's an incredible step forward.
It is. Boy, talking about, making such progress against the grain. Wow.
Now, the only thing that we need now is we've made a very small step. How about the next gay apostle? That's what I'm looking for. How about the next trans member of the 70? Now, so yes, we've made very small progress here.
Yeah. Baby steps, D-Base.
Baby steps. Extremely. These steps are very, very small, but I guess we're gonna get there. Okay, that's all I had to say on that one.
Well, that kind of segues quite nicely into my next article, actually.
Okay.
And we're going to head across the valley to the Salt Lake Tribune. So, we've heard from the churches reporting, and now we're going to hear from the church, the non-churches reporting in Salt Lake. This is another editorial from Keith Burns. Wrote in, says
on April 8th, 2022. Just
that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Who has been one of the best advocates for marginalized groups in the LDS Church? Satan.
What?
That is, he's making a bold statement there. And so when you talk about going back and looking at the things that all these other apostles and leaders and prophets even have said over the years, he says that it really seems that with the progress of all these marginalized communities, speaking of like feminism or the civil rights movement of the 60s and 70s, the church really fought or spoke out harshly against a lot of these movements and said that they were of Satan. And he's pointing out that, a lot of these things that the church said was being put forward by Satan. One thing, Satan must be winning because they're actually making the progress that they're trying to make. But furthermore, it really just makes it... Where does the church stand on this? It just seems like there's a lot of victory going forward.
Well, let me just. Usually, what happens? This is a pattern that I've noticed. Okay, the church has a pronouncement that has happened in some ages past.
Yeah.
And what they do is they don't end up really repealing it. They just stop talking about it. So yes, interracial marriage, according to J. Reuben Clark, was a wicked virus and a satanic perversion. But now you'll never hear in general conference someone espousing and say interracial marriage is 2 thumbs up, good to go. They just stop talking about it, and it filters into the background, and just they hope that it slowly disappears.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of these things where it doesn't go away, it doesn't get repealed.
Right.
They just stop bringing it up and they stop referencing it so much.
It's kind of like the weird laws that are on the books in some states back from like slaveholding times when it was illegal for a person of color to have more than $1.50 in their pocket. Yeah. And the state legislature never got around to repealing it. Now, nobody ever talks about it anymore.
Yeah.
But it's still on the books. And that's the case for most of this stuff.
I mean, on the flip side, I think the state of Missouri just barely repealed the extermination order that Governor Boggs put in place a couple years ago. So, I mean, it used to be legal to hunt Mormons. So, I mean, but how many people have been hunting Mormons since the 1840s?
Only co-eds at BYU looking for return missionaries.
Exactly. They're not even in Missouri.
Yeah. So, the things that used to be satanically inspired, Satan doesn't really, I guess he just doesn't bother with those issues anymore. They used to be super important to him, even the use of contraception. And oral sex. Contraception used to be Satan's tool. Oral sex, also, the church had official statements that said that is a Satan's tool. Yeah. And Satan used to work really hard to prevent some of these things. And I guess he just kind of changed his. He doesn't really work on them anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't have to, because it's just kind of people just sort of become okay with that.
Yeah. So, very, very, very good article. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
A lot. Okay.
But it really makes me wonder, Dave, is how in trouble is the church if Satan keeps having this much victory?
Well, well, I prefer to look at it as a I prefer to look at it as a stalemate.
Yeah.
Because the church has remember, Elder Oak says that he's not aware that the word apology appears in the scriptures, and that the church neither seeks nor offers apologies.
Mm-hmm.
So the church has not apologized for any of these past doctrinal state. You know, the church has never apologized for almost anything in the past.
Yeah.
Not even the Mountain Meadow Massacre managed to get an apology. That seems like an easy slam dunk, by the way.
And that one seems like that's where the whole, well, that was where President Oak's talk came from.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, he said we don't apologize.
That is correct. So there's no reason to apologize for any of these previous statements. We just, we're a forward-looking organization. There's no need to look backwards. Keep your eye on the current brethren, and the prophet will never lead the church astray. That is the basic message here. So, is that it on all of your articles for the week?
Yeah, that does it for me. But let's see, do you have another one?
I do. Now, I've got two last articles here, and then we'll
let's go with yours.
Now, always that comes out of the General Conference, the most news that comes out of the General Conference is, number one, temples, and number two is statistics. Now, there's a little bit difference between the numbers that have been released this time. Now, the church is starting to move away from, it used to be a big deal in General Conference where they would say, now there are 16,700,074 members of the church spread across 12,700 congregations.
Yeah.
Guess what? The church is not releasing. They are releasing that onto their website on the same day instead of announcing it in the General Conference. And let me ask you. We're referencing this article, which is on LDS Church Growth.blogspot.com, Tuesday, April 5th, and it's entitled "Growth of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." Al, why don't you think that they're announcing all of the stats in General Conference anymore?
Good question. So, when I was attending church as a true believing Mormon back in the 2000s, I remember when the church hit 15 million, and I remember when the church hit 16 million, and it seemed like they happened rather rapidly. I mean, it almost looked like a J curve growth. Yeah. So I think of course the church was very proud of that kind of growth, very excited to show it off, but I think that it has steered away from being the J curve exponential growth that it was. And now I think the church just wants it to be seen as, well, we're a global church. And they don't want to draw so much attention to the stagnant of growth, because I mean it is kind of a stagnant growth.
Now the church, let's just be clear, is still growing. In fact, I think the church has only had 2 years where it did not grow. It was like 1858 after we got out here in Utah, and I think there was one other year. So the church has grown basically every single year. So we're not talking about shrinkage here. We're talking about growth that continues to slow. So it's gone from about 1.6% down to only 0.8%. And what this article also brings out is that, listen, where is the church growing now? Well, if you look, it ranks the top 10, ranks the top 14 countries. And so let me see if you can see where these have something in common. Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, Liberia, Angola, number 5, Benin, number 6, Republic of Congo, then Malawi, Sierra Leone. What do these all have in common?
They're all African countries.
The church is going gangbusters in Africa, really, really growing. In fact, the Democratic Republic of Congo grew almost 100,000 members last year. That is tremendous growth for such a small country. Why is it, do you think, Al, that the church is finding such great success in Africa at this particular time?
Well, the church has been pushing a lot of humanitarian aid to Africa for the long time. Yeah. So a lot of these countries are poorer countries, they're war divided countries where people need help. And I think people are latching on to anybody that can help them or is willing to offer.
And Africa is kind of like the new South America was 30 or 40 years ago, where the church was finding that kind of success. So the church, the growth in the United States for the church, I thought was very interesting from this year. The church, the church is got like 17 million members, so about half of them are in the United States. So that's 8.5 United States. The church only grew 40,000 people in the United States out of 8 million.
Mm-hmm.
That's not 1%. That's a 0.5% growth in the United States.
That's almost that's a little less than I would say birth rate would be.
Right. Exactly. And remember, in the United States, these are where all the rich Mormons are with the giant families.
Mm-hmm.
So even just on kids alone,
Mm-hmm.
we should be seeing a lot bigger growth in the United States. That 41,000 number, I'm sure, is a significant disappointment.
Yeah.
So, I listened to a podcast. I'm going to wrap up on this, but I listened to a podcast that dissected the church's numbers overall, and you can figure out based on the church statistics how many people left the church that year as well, because you can see how many children of baptisms were recorded, children of record, and then how many converts. You can add that number to the previous year, and if that number doesn't add up to the next year, you can figure out how many people left.
True.
Okay, so it's pretty easy. The only problem with that, according to the church statistics, about 90,000 people left the church last year for one reason or another. They could have died. They could have had their membership withdrawn. They could have been, whatever. Okay. The problem is that it doesn't really match with the death rate. So in any given year, on average, 1 in 10,000 Mormons will just die.
Yeah.
That's your death rate. And if you have 16 million people, 1 in 10,000 is much, much more than the 90,000 people who left the church. So what we're shining a light on here is that even we want to accept the church's numbers at face value and say, well, these are the only numbers we have. We assume that they're accurate. But we're seeing a lot during a global pandemic where people are dying at much higher rates. The church is claiming a very less amount of people dying than would be reasonably consistent. So it seems like they're keeping a lot of people on the rolls that it's just very curious. It's very curious. So there's a reason that they're pushing these numbers off of the general conference and into the sidelines, is they don't want people really, there's not, pretty soon, there's been less growth for the church every year for 25 years. It is only a matter of time until the church posts negative overall growth. We're at 0.8% this year, and that was less than the previous year. Pretty soon you're going to have a shrinkage. There's no getting around it. Global religion in general is on the decline. This should be a big surprise. So it's just very curious the way that they play with these numbers.
and how openly they're playing with those numbers, because like you said, you just have to have third grade math abilities and you'll be able to figure that out.
I talked to a return missionary just today, by the way, who just came back from his mission 3 days ago, and I asked him, said, how many people in your missionary, he was out in California, how many people are leaving the missions early? And he said a lot of people are leaving early. And what happens is on the transfer days, they're listed as mental health transfers. That means that they're going home. The church, these people are saying that they're having mental health issues when in reality, they don't want to be there, or they've lost their testimony. Now, I think that the two biggest indicators for the healthiness of the church is the following two things. There's two indicators. Number one is your active proselyting, not service, proselyting mission force. Okay. And we're only at 51,000. That's the lowest in 20 years since 1995.
Yeah, that's way down.
That is extremely down. Your number two indicator of a healthiness of the church is, believe it or not, I think tithing is the single biggest factor. Not forget whether someone goes to church, forget whether they wear garments, forget whether they have a temple recommend, forget everything. All you need to know is, are you a full tithe payer? And if you are, you can better believe that is a believing member of the church. Because if you don't believe, I promise you that one of the first things that goes is that money.
Well, what do they say about your treasures where your heart is, or something like that? So I mean, if your treasure is going to the church, then your heart's still there.
Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. That was one of Jesus's parables, right?
That's right.
Okay. Last article on this. And this is kind of an interesting one. In our last podcast, this is the article, by the way, I keep forgetting to say the name of it. This is on April 3rd, 2022, Tad Welch, Deseret News. Conference ends with a call to remove a personal conflict in your life by Easter. And Al, when's Easter this year? Pop quiz.
Easter is next Sunday.
You're very good. Excellent. Absolutely. Don't let anybody question you. That's correct. Now, in our last podcast, you said, the thing about the church's general conference is you hardly get any news out of it because they all sound so similar. And you said, why don't they have a theme for the general conference? Which I thought was a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
You could have a general conference theme. The theme that I would like to see in any of these general conference would be like gospel topics, essays, themes. Now that would be a general conference I would tune into.
Yeah.
How about a Book of Abraham themed general conference? Now I would watch every minute of it.
Publicly.
I would watch every minute of that. Okay. I don't think we're going to see that, but there was kind of a little bit of news that came out of there that I'm not familiar with them ever having done this before. And it was leaders testify of Jesus Christ as the peacemaker and author of a divine plan of happiness. The 2-day conference includes declarations on marriage, gender, and support of religious liberty. But President Nelson issued a challenge. And I thought it was a really, really good idea and a super duper challenge. And his challenge was that, he challenges everyone to forgive someone. Oops. Sorry about that background there.
That's all right. We got co-host that just piped down.
I'm at my brother's house. He's got 2 dogs and a cat, so I'm trying to keep it real. So he challenged everyone to forgive someone in their lives by Easter. We should learn, he said, quote, we should learn from the past and be prepared for the future. And let's lift up the hands that hang down. And and continuing his quote, could there be a more fitting act of gratitude to Jesus Christ for his atonement? If forgiveness presently seems impossible, plead for power through the atoning blood of Jesus Christ to help you. And as you do so, I promise a personal peace and a burst of spiritual momentum, end quote. I thought that was a great challenge.
Yeah. And I think that's a pretty safe promise that he made too. Yeah.
Now, it's a lot harder. When it comes to prophets, you kind of wish that the prophets would prophesy, but since this is about the best work, you also kind of wish that seers would see and that revelators would reveal. That would be preferable. So I guess we're going to take what we can get on this one.
So go and forgive somebody and you're going to feel peace in your heart. Well, that's because forgiveness is the gift that you give yourself.
Indeed, it is.
They say that bearing a grudge is like trying to poison somebody else while drinking the poison yourself.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah. And I've got this narrowed down here. I need some help, Al. I've got it narrowed down to 4 people that I feel the need that I need to forgive. And believe it or not, I think you know who these people are. So we're going to be wrapping it up on this segment. But here's the 4 that I have in mind, and I want your help in helping me forgive them. Okay, my number 1 is Paul H. Dunn. My number 2 is George P. Lee.
Okay.
My number 3 is James Hamula, and my number 4 is Ted Bundy. These are all Mormons.
Oh, geez. You swing for the fence on this one, do you?
Hey, look, I've got a small grudge here against all 4 of these. Now, Paul Dunn was a member of the 70. He told a lot of tall tales. He claimed to be a war hero and play professional baseball. Oops, didn't end up happening. He got released early. George P. Lee was also a general authority, and he raped a girl, ended up serving prison in southern Utah in a hurricane in Purgatory. The jail there is called Purgatory. James Hamula is the latest general authority who has been released from his calling. They did not give us any details whatsoever. All they would say was that he didn't leave for apostasy's sake. And then finally, we have Ted Bundy, who committed a bunch of murders in Washington, came to Utah to go to the University of Utah Law School, joined the Mormon Church while he was here. I guess whoever that bishop was, all I want to say is, oops, sorry.
Yeah.
I think that bishop had an off day. But who of those 4 do you think, Al? I need some help. Who of those 4 do you think deserves I'm going to try to forgive in my heart one of those 4. Who do you think?
Boy, I don't know who's going to be the most deserving of forgiveness. But I'll tell you, the hardest one to forgive, in my opinion, will be Ted Bundy.
Okay.
And the reason why it will be the hardest is because he went into an interview with this guy that was clearly trying to lead Ted Bundy into giving him a sound clip that says, the reason why I committed all these murders against these girls was because of pornography. And the church has still used those quotes even to this day, as saying, "Oh, well, if you get hooked on porn, you're gonna go start murdering people," and so that would be the biggest one to overcome, in my opinion.
That would be the toughest.
Yeah. Second behind that would be George P. Lee. Then I think that if you're just looking for an easy way to get over somebody, let's go with let's go with Paul Dunn.
Okay, Paul Dunn. That's okay. I'm going to work on that for next week. I'm going to give you a report for next week.
He's dead. He's been pushed aside and kicked under the rug. So,
Now, I might say also that Paul Dunn is the only one out of those that I'm aware that offered any type of an apology. So he mustered up a very weak apology, which was put out through the Deseret News, church-owned publication. So maybe he's the best one. Honorable mention would be Mark Hoffman, but I tell you, I cannot forgive Mark Hoffman.
No.
You call me sick and twisted, but I kind of like Mark Hoffman. I know that sounds very horrible. I don't like the murders, but I like his forgeries. Obviously, he was an evil and diabolical person, but I thought that the forgeries...
How can you really like a supervillain? And I would have to consider he is one of the most notorious supervillains of Mormonism.
Right. So, by the way, when it comes to the world's most famous Mormons, let me I keep saying we're going to wrap this up, but this is a list of some pretty interesting Mormons. Who is the most famous Mormon in the world right now?
Right now, I would say it's Mitt Romney.
That's correct. Oh, obviously, number one, he ran for president. He got 130 million votes.
Yeah, he's a sitting senator.
No doubt.
He's also a sitting senator that's gone against his party lines.
That is correct. So he's the most famous Mormon. But the second most famous Mormon, it could be Brigham Young, but it also could be Ted Bundy. Number two in the running has got to be either Brigham Young or Ted Bundy. And I don't have any data on that, but it's got to be one of those two.
Well, when you look at how many movies they made about Ted Bundy over the last 3 or 4 years, I'd have to agree with you. It's definitely Ted Bundy. I mean, as far as all-time famous Mormons, yeah.
Yep. Okay. So
currently living? No, he's not currently living, but yeah.
No, they executed him in Florida a long time ago. Okay. Hey, it was great to ruminate on the great and spacious beehive.
As always.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. I'm joined here by my co-host Al, and it just come back again next week for some more great content.
Yep, we look forward to it.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a being with no moral constraints. My number one goal is to hurt the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.